Hey, welcome back to the About the Labor podcast here at VikingsTerritory.com. I am BJ Reidell, back here with my guy, Drew Mahowald, and today, I don't really know exactly what we're going to talk about, but we're planning on talking about, the injury report, what we do know, what has been released on both teams thus far, talk a little bit about the Saints offense and how the Vikings can look to defend them in the best possible way. And then we'll talk a little bit about Pat Shurmur. If you guys haven't heard, he is reportedly, receiving offers from a lot of different organizations, and the primary one is the Arizona Cardinals. So we'll talk a little bit about that and kind of what that means to the Vikings situation and how that affects everything. And then we'll close out the week with our picks. So that's about all I got on that front. So let me get a quick sponsor note out of the way here. This is coming from Can Wonderland. Just wanted to give you guys a quick heads up that Can Wonderland, on top of the artisan pizza, on top of the great beer right above them, and in their own in-house as well at Black Stack Brewing, they also are doing comedy improv, karaoke, game shows and trivia, live music, and plenty of other stuff. This all goes on throughout the week. This is, they have a lot of big plans to get more and more fun involved. So again, as always, check out Can Wonderland. They do a phenomenal job just basically creating a space for everyone to have a good time, with the demographic not just being younger people. You could bring your kids there and feel comfortable. If you have kids, that is. I personally do not. So I don't know what that's like, but you know what I'm saying. So Can Wonderland. Can Wonderland. Yeah, so let's get into this injury report, talk a little bit about what we do know so far. Drew, why don't you detail that for me?
Yeah, I mean, the great thing about a bye week is that players have an extra week to get healthy. And so the Vikings really don't have any major injuries to worry about right now. It looks like, for Wednesday anyway, the only players that did not practice in full were Terrence Newman, who, the injury is a foot injury. I assume a lot of it is just, Veterans Day off / has the respect and doesn't need to completely practice. And Shamar Stephen, who plays roughly 18 to 20% of the snaps probably in a game. So not, the Vikings are completely, as healthy as any team
Those
really
are
can
some
be.
Important pieces, though.
Yeah.
I think
they are. Right. But they're not, it could be a lot worse for sure.
Right. It's worth noting that Shamar Stephen has been, I think that he's grown a ton over the course of his relatively short career in Minnesota. The way he is used is always, it's interesting to me because he was originally drafted to be. I think it looked like he was going to be a guy that could move all around the the defensive line. But at this point in his career, he's doing his best work as a nose tackle. So
right. It helps too that the Vikings are typically ahead in games, and so teams are playing from behind. They're in their passing packages. Right. Vikings are in their nickel, or they're I guess what do you want to call prevent defense packages, and he's not part of that team. So that's part of it too. But long story short, the Vikings are very, very healthy. Pat Elflein's going to return after the shoulder injury. Xavier Rhodes is fully healthy again. He's practicing in full. And the Saints did lose a starting left guard last week, and they'll have a replacement there. Brandon Coleman got beat up last week and did not practice all Wednesday, and they have a bunch of guys limited. So, that's why you get a home field, or that's why you get a first round bye, is for the extra rest, and that's why you get, that's why teams are given that advantage. You get the extra rest or to recover, get healthy, and then you're set up for the stretch run here.
Yeah. So you look at specifically, the Saints injury report. Are any concerns for you? Are any of those players, I guess, in your opinion, a big loss?
I think I'm just going to look back at the left guard, Andrus Peat, who is going to miss the season, I believe. I think he had a broken ankle or something. But I think, in my opinion, he's the weakest link of that offensive line. And so they're going to bring in even a weaker link to replace him. I believe his name is I have to double check, like Clemente or something like that. That's
not a guy that I've heard of before.
I can't bring it up right here. His name is Senio Clemente. So according to Pro Football Focus here, what I saw last week, he didn't run block very well. His run blocking grade is rather poor. And I believe so I looked at this in my Skull Scale. I wrote about this, how Linval Joseph has a big advantage on the interior offensive line of the interior offensive line of the Saints. Between Max Unger, Larry Warford, and now Senio Clemente, their average run block grade is under 46. And so Linval Joseph will have, he will be able to eat things up on Sunday, and that running back duo of Ingram and Kamara, they can still do damage on the outside for sure, right, and outside of the A gap, but I would imagine the A gap will be pretty plugged. So, otherwise those injuries, from what we know anyway at this point, a lot of guys are just getting rested, and I would assume other than that injury, they'll be all ready to go. Brandon Cohen might be a little bit beat up, the receiver there, but I imagine that the Saints will be fully healthy otherwise.
Well, that's, I think that you want both teams to be fully healthy in a game like this, right?
Yes and no.
Yes and no. I mean, as a Vikings fan, do I want every single Saints player to be out? Yeah, of course. But, I think you look at the situation and you look at, what the Vikings need to succeed and what they, want to see, what they want in order to succeed. And I think that this is the type of game where you look at the competitive level of this game, right? It's better for football in general if both of these teams are fully healthy, and that's part of why it's so great to have a bye week, right? It gives the Vikings the opportunity to play their game, and the Saints, unfortunately for them, had to play last week against Carolina, and it was a tough battle. That was a game where you mentioned Andrews Peat going down. That's potentially a very big loss for them. I think that's a big loss for him. He's a talented player. He's always been considered to be a talented player, and I think that he's came on in a big way for the most part this season. So that's a big loss. It's tough to see him go down if you are a Saints fan. But from a Vikings perspective, I think that certainly helps, improve the opportunity to win this football game. So from there, I'm going to break into another quick sponsor note. This one will go real quick, though. I'll try not to dawdle that much. SOCOM Creative, it's our agency. They're our team that works, in unison with us. They're on the same page as us pretty much at all times. And I think that they do a great job, for us, getting us into a position where we can succeed. So if you want to check them out, SOCOM Creative, make sure that you remember that it's not just SOCOM, it's SOCOM Creative. That part's important. So make sure to check them out. And they do all kinds of different stuff. I've mentioned in the past that they build apps. They do, they do everything. So give them a call, check them out online, and let's move back into the Saints offense now. What are you seeing from the Saints offense, Drew? Is there anything, I guess, in your opinion that stands out versus what we kind of already know? I mean, we know that Drew Brees is a Hall of Fame quarterback. That's who he is. That's the player he always has been. That's the player that that he kind of he's put himself up on this pedestal, right? He's always been a guy that is in the conversation with guys like Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, but he's never really garnered the same type of respect. So Brees is very good. Alvin Kamara, also very good. Mark Ingram, very good. Lots of talent across the board here. You look at the wide receiver position too. So what are your thoughts?
I mean, I think a lot of people have looked at how Ingram and Kamara have broken out and kind of really helped Drew Brees, because now he has an offense that is both dangerous on the ground and through the air. And for most of his career, it's been just through the air where he's been able to pick defenses apart. But lately down the stretch here, this running game has actually taken a step back. They've only reached over 100 yards once in the last 5 games, and they only had 41 yards last week against the Panthers in total. And so I think, they're cold right now, this running game is, but it's not that this offense can't hurt you. Obviously, Drew Brees is a Hall of Fame quarterback, Super Bowl champion. He's one of the best pure passers, if not the best pure passer in the NFL. So it's not like the Vikings have an easy test. It's going to be difficult, but I think it's encouraging to see this running game that was just so dangerous during the season. I mean, They had a stretch here of 6, 7, 8, 9 games in a row where they reached over 100 yards, and many of those are over 150 yards, and that duo is definitely dangerous. But they have been cooled off, and they have mainly been a one-dimensional offense here the last few weeks, and I think that really bodes well for the Vikings defense.
Well, I think that these guys are all very talented. It's just sort of a matter of can they execute, right? That's really what it comes down to. So, just because I've been preaching team sport about the Vikings doesn't necessarily mean that it's not a team sport for the Saints too, right? I think that they work well as a team, but at the same
sure.
But that's kind of what coaching is, right? Coaching is super important to getting guys to work as a team, and I think that Sean Payton does that very well. But at the same time, it's difficult to manage this type of situation with so many young athletes, right? You look at Kamara, you look at Ingram, who, in my opinion, is having his kind of a breakout season for himself. That is, he's been known as a very talented player in the past, but this is kind of the season where it's been a bit of a coming out party for him, and that's why I think that he's probably the more dangerous of the two running backs this week. And you look at everything that the Saints have accomplished pretty much since Adrian Peterson was traded to Arizona. And I don't mean to knock Adrian Peterson. I say this all the time that he's a prolific rusher, but he has never really been a great pass catcher. And I think that that's something that the Saints like to do quite a bit. So, it's important to note how good this Saints team is, but it's also important to kind of take it into perspective here and understand what's happening with Sean Payton, what he's able to accomplish, what he has accomplished in the past. And, I think that he'll come out with a great game plan for this, for this matchup. And, we'll see how Mike Zimmer handles that, but ultimately it really just comes down to how well can the Vikings adapt? How well can they handle this moment? And I think that Mike Zimmer's going to have them prepared for this.
Yeah, I mean that was the gist of my School Skill article. I hate to keep publicly endorsing it, I guess.
I like it when you do
about it on the show, but I mean the gist of it was you can look at all these different matchups in the game, and I think it's fairly even throughout. That Vikings win a lot of those kind of head-to-head matchups. The Saints win a lot of them, but I think the Vikings get the edge because of coaching. And I think Mike Zimmer, it might be a little bit bold to say he's a better coach than Sean Payton, but I think the innovation he has brought to this defense and the playmakers that are on the defense, and he uses them so well and gives them great opportunities to succeed. And the fact that it is a no-name defense, that it's not just one guy out there dominating and then the rest are kind of supporting him. It's all three levels are, working together. As you say, it's a team sport, and I think that has really shown out with Mike Zimmer. So that's kind of why I think they have the edge, because if you look at the Saints offense this season, and they have, there's a few key players that have really been the punch of that offense at some point this season. Alvin Kamara, Mark Ingram, both obviously. They've been, they've each had their breakout games, how many yards and touchdowns in a game, whatever you have you. But I think the Vikings have a counterpunch there with Anthony Barr, Eric Kendricks, whether it be covering them in the flat, or you can look at this run defense. Ben Gideon has been a really underrated run stopper as a linebacker. Or you can look at Michael Thomas at receiver, and he's been, 1,200 yards receiving, clearly a Pro Bowl caliber player.
He's always been good.
I mean, some of us are a little salty about him being mentioned after the whole draft situation in 2016, but the Vikings have a counterpunch for everything the Saints have that the advantage, right? I mean, Michael Thomas is their go-to receiver. Vikings have an elite shutdown cornerback. They have two running backs that are prolific at running the ball and receiving. Vikings have linebackers and safeties that can control that. So that's why I think the Vikings, the coaching advantage with Zimmer, but I also think they have the athletes to, I guess, counterpunch what the Saints have used really well this season to succeed. And I think if the Saints win, they'll have to have a big performance from an under-the-radar guy that has not had a big game this season.
Yeah, it's going to come down to coaching, I think. And, you look at kind of take this into perspective for a little bit here. I was watching, I think I saw this on Twitter, or I was watching NFL Network. I can't remember exactly what was going on. But so a lot of very respectable people on NFL Network. I believe Sean O'Hara was on there. I can't remember who else was on there, but they did that thing where they had the on the screen, and honestly, I don't understand technology, so just it was on the screen, and they have like the bullet points basically listing.
Oh, I remember seeing this. Yep, they get the advantage. I think it was quarterback, running back, pass catchers, defense, and coaching, or something like that.
Something like that, yeah. And everyone said Saints all the way, with exception to the Vikings defense. And I think that to a degree is incorrect. I mean, I think
it's incorrect to even analyze it that way, because like the quarterbacks aren't battling each other, the running backs aren't going against each other, the pass catchers aren't going against each other. I mean, that's just a completely wrong way to look at the matchup. But ratings and stuff like that for TV, right?
It is what it is. I think that this Vikings team is prepared to take the next step, not just this season, but in general, right? This is a team that is very, very talented, top to bottom, and I don't think there's a debate about it anymore. There are people who are going to debate the subject, and that's just the nature of football. I love to debate anything. That's who I am as a person. I love to fight with just about anyone, including Drew at points. So, that's just, I think that's part of being a real person. Just debating, sharing your thoughts, and doing what you think is right. And so I think the Vikings are the better team here, and I think that they have better coaching. At this point in time, I believe that Mike Zimmer is the better coach. Sean Payton has done wonders, absolute wonders. What he was able to accomplish, especially with Hurricane Katrina, like kind of hanging over their heads, that was extremely impressive. But at the same time, it's a different era of the NFL. And while his team is very competitive and very talented, I think that more and more people are starting to realize that it's just a team sport. And it depends more on how many different pieces that you have, as opposed to one really, really great player. Do I have to mention the Green Bay Packers again? I think I will, just for our audience. Aaron Rodgers going down shifted everything. It became a different season because of that injury. And, I think that sets a precedent moving forward, that it's not just about who is, which one player can control the outcome of a game. I think that your point earlier in the year about, and I guess throughout the year, since you are an Aaron Rodgers lover, that he is probably the most talented player in the NFL right now. I think that's accurate. But at the same time, he's not the most accomplished player in the NFL, and he's definitely not the most accomplished quarterback. That's Tom Brady. And so until I see otherwise, that's the point that I'm going to argue, is that Tom Brady is Tom Brady because of what he has been able to do in terms of, his reputation, his technical skills,
his accomplishments.
Those things are all very important to determining, talent versus, it's always going to be a talent versus accomplishments argument, I think, in sports.
Always.
It's the LeBron versus Kobe.
The LeBron, MJ, and Kobe too. You can throw all those guys in there. It's how much you value the trophies and the awards and the accomplishments this player has gotten versus what they show on the on the court, on the field, their talent, all of the versatility they have, etc. That's the debate in these arguments.
And so that brings us kind of a little bit to that Randy Moss thought, which I brought up briefly, I believe, on the last show, just to say that, Randy Moss is probably the most talented receiver of all time. Probably. To come through the league, I mean, you can make an argument for Calvin Johnson, I think. You can make an argument for a couple of other guys. I mean, I always thought that Andre Johnson was another extremely talented player that did a lot of work well into his 30s to prove just how talented he is. And I think that there's a lot of players around. There's a lot of wide receivers that we can look back on and say, this guy might be the best receiver. Jerry Rice is probably the best example of this. Everyone looks at his accomplishments and says, all right, Jerry Rice, incredible route runner, incredible work ethic, incredible reception totals, did it for a long time. He's the best receiver in NFL history. But I don't think that that's the right approach. I think that Randy Moss is the best receiver in NFL history, and for that reason, I don't care if you don't like Randy Moss. I don't care. I really don't care. His personality should not be a part of whether or not he gets into the Hall of Fame. He makes mistakes like every other person in the world. Everyone makes mistakes. That's how people are. And if you think that your shit doesn't stink, you're wrong. Like, that's how life is. And so I think that it's imperative that Randy Moss is in the Hall of Fame on the first ballot, just to set a precedent moving forward that it's not acceptable to just look at a guy and say, don't like him, not going in there. And I think that that's kind of how some of the old school, voters still, with Terrell Owens. You mentioned this in the last show too. It's frustrating from my perspective that people look at some of these players and just say, well, yeah, they were good. Yeah, their numbers are high, but I didn't like them. So, sorry. Well, that's not life, because whoever the voter is that makes that puts the person that like chooses when, kind of whoever the guy is that makes the choice to put a guy in here as opposed to here, it's unfair to me. And I think that Randy Moss is a Hall of Famer. And I know we're a little bit off subject here, but I do think that it kind of correlates with the entire theme here, that it's more important to evaluate what the person is capable of as opposed to what the person actually accomplished, because it is a team sport.
Well, you can look at Drew Brees that way. I mean,
right.
He was relatively average to above average starting quarterback in San Diego. And he had the shoulder injury. Nobody wanted him. He's obviously undersized. We can have the same kind of debate about Case Keenum too, but Drew Brees went to a system in New Orleans with Sean Payton that meshes really well, and you can talk about the same type of thing with Belichick and Brady, where they each kind of unlocked their potential in each other, and I think that's what works with New Orleans. So, I think Drew Brees is clearly, if he's not the best, he's one of the best quarterbacks the Vikings will face at all, for the entire season. What do they have? They've had Brees, they've had Rodgers for a quarter, but that doesn't really count. They've had Matt Ryan, they've had Ben Roethlisberger, Stafford. I mean, he's probably the best guy they've played this year. And in the first meeting, you can say what you want about, Adrian Peterson in the game, their running game not being existent, this and that. Vikings were pretty, they locked them down pretty good. It took a garbage time touchdown to make that game appear close. But I would imagine Sean Payton will bring some more wrinkles into the game plan this week, knowing how good this Vikings defense is. So I think from there we can go into the same kind of matchup, game, I guess, we played last time. We look at those three matchups. We can start with the Vikings defensive line and the Saints offensive line. I think I know where you're going with this one, and I think most of our listeners know where we're going to go for this answer. But the Vikings defensive line versus the Saints offensive line, where do you see the advantage there?
I think it's pretty clear that the Vikings defensive line is superior here, especially with Andrews Pete being out. We've talked about that enough already. I think that it's just it's not easy to adjust to an injury in 1 week, especially a critical injury like the one that Pete suffered. So I think it's pretty clear that the Vikings defensive line are superior here. Will there be people that are going to debate me on that? I'm sure. But Danielle Hunter is incredibly talented. Linval Joseph is incredibly, incredibly talented. I mean, Tom Johnson has stepped up in a big way. I mentioned Shamar Stephen earlier. If he's out, that hurts the team just because it hurt. All injuries hurt this Vikings team just because everyone has a role. There are guys that have larger roles than others, but everyone has a role. And then you finish up with Everson Griffin on the right side, and I think that makes it pretty clear that the Vikings defensive line is superior here. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm going to go with the Vikings defensive line here. I don't think there's much of a doubt there, but I will say that I think the tackles for New Orleans are pretty solid. I think Teron Armstead on the left side there with Griffin, that could be an interesting matchup. I think Griffin's a better player, but I think Armstead could hold his own there and at least make Griffin work for it. And then, not to brag, but Ryan Ramczyk at right tackle for the Saints. I may or may not have been right about him, 8 months ago during draft season. I don't know. Maybe you guys will listen to me. Maybe you won't. But he's been very, very good. And, I thought he'd be playing left tackle, but he's playing right tackle. I thought the Vikings should have drafted him or traded up for him, but I guess Dalvin Cook is okay.
Well, I guess he is okay too. But you look at just to go back to Ramczyk, I'll give you props. So you don't even need to brag for yourself. I'll give it to you because I liked Ramczyk coming out of Wisconsin. I'm very familiar with Wisconsin football, being someone that has to deal with it regularly. And so I talked to a couple of people, and they they gave me a general idea of who's good and who isn't. And one thing that I always remember about Wisconsin football is that they produce offensive line talent at an incredible rate. I don't know what they're doing there that makes, that allows players to go from the college level to the professional level.
I mean, year after year, their offensive line size-wise is bigger than any offense or NFL offensive line. Like, they always have 6'9", 310-pound tackles, and their center is like 6'5", 330 or something dumb.
And part of that is just because, it's because you set the reputation that, hey, we're sending guys to the NFL. That's what we do here. That's what Wisconsin football does. So immediately when I saw Ryan Ramczyk and I started reading about his story and kind of the self-improvements that he made, as long with like the work ethic and all of that type of stuff, it made a whole lot of sense to me almost immediately that this guy was going to be a talented player. But it was more a matter of could he adjust to the NFL. And I always thought that he was a high character guy. Again, I don't know that for a fact. I've never met Ryan Ramczyk, but the way that he goes about his business, what I have seen from him, tells me that he is a high character player, and I think that he could be a problem. But at the same time, I always trust Everson Griffin, always, and. I always trust Neil Hunter, and whatever alignment Mike Zimmer chooses to put him in, I trust Mike Zimmer. So it's a situation where the defensive line is pretty clearly superior here. Now I don't know what's going to happen. Anything can happen on any given Sunday. That's how the NFL works, but that's how I see it. So let's move on to that.
Be the running backs of the Saints and the linebackers of the Vikings, which you have a lot of talent in that matchup right there. But who do you have?
See, this one's difficult because I think that Mark Ingram is the better of the two running backs. I think that a lot of people are going to yell at me about that.
Wow, I gave you the coldest eyebrow. Obviously this is a podcast, and only people on YouTube will see that. But
right.
That was a cold eyebrow I gave you because I think Kamara, potential wise, for sure, you have to agree with that Kamara is better, right? Like he has the higher ceiling, right?
From a potential standpoint, I loved Kamara coming out of Tennessee, right? We talked about this back in April. He's extremely talented. He's extremely versatile. But I think the Vikings have an answer to him. Anthony Barr and Eric Kendricks are incredible at what they do, in my opinion. They have been great all season long. And, they complement each other extremely well. I talked about this a little bit in, I believe it was the mailbag for zone coverage the most recent week, that these guys have such great chemistry together that it's incredible. It really is, and that's why what Mike Zimmer has done here, and Rick Spielman as well, and Rob Brzezinski, and really the entire upper management as a whole, what they have accomplished this year in terms of the turnaround in about 4 years to get to to give the Vikings the opportunity to play in this game is simply incredible. I laugh.
Yeah, it is.
I laugh because it's so un-Vikings. Right, we look at the past. We look at the past, and we look at how we've seen turnovers, and we've seen turnaround, and we've seen kind of streaks of very competitive play. But I don't think we've ever seen anything quite like this.
Just thinking about how bad that 2013 defense was. I've last in yards allowed, and I believe 30th or 31st in points allowed, and now they're first in both. That's all Mike Zimmer. That is completely 100% Mike Zimmer, and then the talent that he and Spielman brought in as well since then. That that and Anthony Barr and Eric Kendricks are both part of that overhaul. But I'm going to pick Ingram and Kamara in this matchup because I think together their talent is higher, and I think it's being used very effectively, and I think it's more. I'm going to bet on that matchup here. I think the Saints can still take advantage, especially if Kendricks. I think he's not that he's been bad, but I think he's prone to the mistake or two, and I think Kamara especially can induce that mistake a little bit more than other running backs they face this year. So I know you're giving me a cold hard head shake right now.
Because I just can't believe it, man. Like it's just like I think that the Vikings have established a very real precedent here. That Anthony Barr, Eric Kendricks, Ben Gideon, even Emmanuel Lemur, all of them, they're incredible as a cohesive unit. And so long as Mike Zimmer has them on the same page with him, and they're doing their thing, and they're listening to their coach, and they keep the same mentality, and all the things that I've been preaching over the last however many weeks, I think the Vikings are fine at this level as well. Now, is this a situation where the Vikings could potentially get too high and mighty coming out of a bye week? Maybe. I don't think
that doesn't seem very Vikings to me.
That doesn't seem very Vikings to me either.
Very Mike Zimmer.
I don't see. Mike Zimmer is the type of guy to me that adapts extremely well on the fly. I mentioned this in the last episode. Peyton is a guy that does that as well, but I think that Mike Zimmer does it better. I think, and is that fair?
I mean, no, because we can go back to that Rams game. I mean, on the very first drive of the game, the scripted plays, Rams went down, scored a touchdown, and Mike Zimmer adapted on the fly, and the Rams literally didn't score another point the rest of the game. And that was the highest scoring offense in the NFL at that point. I believe they finished the season as the highest scoring offense. So, I mean, you're adapting on the fly, comment there I think is pretty accurate. But I'm still taking Ingram and Kamara here because you don't accomplish what they did this season, and I don't think there's any linebacker duo in the NFL that I would pick against them right now. Right. But, I mean, we can move on to receivers and DBs, and I think I know who I'm going to pick.
Do we even really need to talk about this? We know that
probably not.
We know that Xavier Rhodes is good. We know that Harrison Smith is good. We know that Anderson Dejo has improved this season. We know that Trey Waynes has improved this season, and we know that Mac Alexander has improved this season. So, I think the Saints have plenty of talent in their wide receiver group. That's who they are. They have also done a tremendous job, turning this team around quickly. But I don't think that they match up well with this Vikings defense in terms of the secondary, because it's just Michael Thomas for the most part.
This is why I remember we broke this down week one of how well the Vikings DBs match up with the Saints, because you have Michael Thomas, big physical guy, good route runner, and mostly lines up outside. Xavier Rhodes is almost the perfect, opponent to have against him. And I mean, Rhodes didn't shadow Thomas completely week one, but I would imagine there would be more of that this time around. And then you have Ted Ginn on the other side, who typically is outside, and a speedy guy who likes to run vertical routes. And Trey Waynes should have the skill set to defeat that. Then you have Brandon Coleman, who works in the slot a lot as a bigger guy, which could be a problem for and looking at the size difference. But Harrison Smith and Anderson Dejo, and even Mackenzie Alexander too, to an extent, has had success against those type of players. So, the one thing Trey Waynes got beat on that double move against the Saints week one, and that I think resulted in a field goal or a touch. Maybe it was their only touchdown for the Saints week one. But I would be worried about that a little bit. But Trey Waynes has been phenomenal since the beginning of December. I think someone posted his stats yesterday that his pass rating allowed is something like 52 since then, and that's phenomenal. So I think the Vikings have the advantage here, and it's not that the Saints don't have playmakers on that receiving core. It's just the Vikings are straight up elite, and there's so many good playmakers and so many guys, reaching their potential either very soon in their careers, much sooner than they should, or guys like Harrison Smith, whose peak is lasting for longer than it probably should. So I think the Vikings have the advantage here, and so I think you went 3-0 for the Vikings here in this, and I went 2-1. So for the Vikings in these 3 matchups.
Do you want to talk about Pat Shurmur a little bit? Or do we? I can't even remember. Do we already do that?
No, we did not do that already.
Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah.
Just because our guy Daryl Stoffren talked a little bit, he mentioned to us that this was something that he was interested in hearing about. I mentioned at the top of the show that Pat Shurmur is currently being, I don't know, interrogated by a lot of different teams, but a couple of them have already picked their head coaches or have made decisions, I suppose, on that. And Pat Shurmur's still available because the Vikings are still in the postseason. I think he's handling the situation very well. There have been no reports of him, speaking with other teams or anything like that. So I think that's probably a good sign for the Vikings. But I have read that from a lot of different credible sources that he is, Arizona is becoming the front runner here. Yep. And I think that the Vikings still have the opportunity to retain him, but at the same time, I have to look at the situation and see that Shurmur has accomplished so much this season. And if he continues to lead this team offensively, I don't think it's fair to, get mad at the guy for trying to be a head coach again. And I think that Arizona is it's possibly a great destination for him. But ultimately, that decision comes up to him. Comes down to what he wants to do. That's what I try to preach, is that you can be mad at Pat Shurmur for leaving, but it's his decision. It's his life. Let him
If he's
do
taking,
his thing.
If he's going to earn twice as much money and live in Arizona to coach football, go ahead and do that,
Right.
So that's the Vikings, they can always retain him, depending on pay, depending on certain benefits, incentives in his contract, whatever it would be. But I think I've already accepted that he's going to be gone, and I think Arizona is probably a really good fit for him. And I think with him, he will bring either Case Keenum or Sam Bradford, because Arizona doesn't have a quarterback right now at all. I think Drew Stanton is their only quarterback. Carson Palmer retired. They're looking to overhaul the position. It gives Shurmur a very good opportunity to really set up what he wants in Arizona, and that's another reason why I think he's going to end up there at this point. It really gives him a lot of control over where that franchise goes. Obviously, at quarterback, I think if Bradford's healthy, that's who he goes with over there. Or he can kind of do both. He can bring in Keenum or Bradford, and then draft a guy that fits his skill set for what he likes to do in his scheme. Right. Develop it from there, and that gives him a lot of control over what he wants to do. So.
Let's not forget about the fact too that there's a lot of very good quarterbacks in this draft class.
You're normally talking cornerbacks, so make sure you get emphasized quarterbacks.
Yeah. Everyone from Sam Darnold, Josh Rosen, Lamar Jackson, Baker Mayfield. There's so much talent in this draft class. So, I think it's a great opportunity for Pat Shurmur if he wants it. And I don't know if he wants it or not. But if that's what he wants, I think Vikings fans need to support him in that, because his last opportunity to be a head coach was not a great one. And
no, it wasn't. It was Cleveland. It's never a great opportunity in Cleveland.
We saw how that's gone for Hugh Jackson, right?
Hey, he still has a job. He's 1-31 in his career, but with the Browns, but he still got a job.
He's 1-31 in his career.
Pat Shurmur won like 8 games or 9 games. He won 9 or 10 games in 2 years. So he should be probably put in the Browns Hall of Fame for that, probably, right? Like
at this point, yes.
Yes. When's the last coach to win that many games? I think the Browns won like 10 games randomly in like 2005 or 2006, but since then I don't think they've won more than 5 games in a season.
I believe it's been since Brian Hoyer. Was Brian Hoyer when they started?
No, that was the Shurmur year when that was, I believe that. Or
weird.
Yeah.
Weird.
Yeah.
That's so strange. That's so strange. It's almost like Pat Shurmur's really good at his job or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I believe that's all we need to talk about with Pat Shurmur. So let's get our picks out real quick, and then we will finish out the show with one more sponsor note, and that'll be it for heading into game time.
Yeah. Obviously, the first matchup. Well, we'll end with the Vikings one. We'll go to the first matchup of the weekend, Atlanta at Philadelphia. This is going to be the opponent if the Vikings win for a chance to play in the Super Bowl. Who do you got?
I don't want to go back on what I've said previously. I think that Atlanta is a postseason powerhouse, and I don't care that Kyle Shanahan isn't there anymore. So I'm going to pick Atlanta in this situation. I think that they are the better team. I think that Matt Ryan is extremely talented, and this is just a very well-run organization, in my opinion, because you look at the body of work and how relatively seamless the transition has been from Shanahan to Sarkisian. Were there bumps in the road throughout the year? Yes, of course.
Yeah, but that's expected to some degree.
It is expected. That's how football is. So I think Atlanta's going to win this football game. That's my pick for there. How about you?
Yeah, I'm going to go with the Falcons, and I just can't. The Eagles, they kind of dwindled down the stretch. I thought that defense looked a little bit more vulnerable, and then obviously no Carson Wentz is a big deal, arguably the MVP of the season. So I'm going with the Falcons, and it's really unfortunate for the Eagles because they had very much a Super Bowl team in Philadelphia, and they're probably not going to win a playoff game at home against the 6th seed, and it's not embarrassing because of the circumstances, but it sucks. It really sucks, and I hope Carson recovers because
the Eagles,
he seems like a nice person.
I think he's a pretty nice guy, but again, that's just my opinion on the matter. The Eagles are a good team without Carson Wentz, but I don't think they're a great team, and I think that Atlanta is when they're firing on all
they
cylinders,
could be a great team. They're definitely the higher ceiling right now, and I think you have to trust that coaching staff and those players that have been this far before to kind of take it to that level. But so that's why I'm going with the Falcons. The next one, a couple of AFC matchups here. Tennessee at New England. This seems one-sided, but Tennessee came back out of nowhere last week to win. So who do you got?
I don't really know. Why don't...
Wow. Tennessee and New England? Are you being sarcastic right now?
It's
the biggest Tom Brady.
That's really none of your business.
Okay.
I think
right.
Tom Brady. I've said this 100 times. I think he's the best quarterback in the NFL. But I also think that Marcus Mariota is developing very quickly, and so
he's throwing touchdowns to himself, so that's pretty remarkable.
I legitimately laughed out loud by myself watching that touchdown because it was funny because it looked like he was prepared for it, right? Like he threw the ball, hands went up, batted down, and
he's just waiting for it.
He's sitting there and he's like, okay, and then he turned into a wide receiver like no problem, and he dove to the pylon, and there was a touchdown. And that I believe that was his first.
Only elite quarterbacks do that, right? Only quarterbacks that have developed way quicker than anyone else do that. So that's
Brad
your
Johnson.
point. Yeah.
Brad Johnson is the other one, the other elite quarterback.
So. Yeah, of course. Brad Johnson, Marcus Mariota, same type of athlete.
Right. So I'm going to pick the Patriots here, but I also think that Marcus Mariota is very talented, and I don't necessarily know what I think the sky is the limit for Marcus Mariota. I'm just not sure if this is the time for him just yet because New England they seem to be starting to crumble. We've seen all kinds of reports throughout the season about feuds with Belichick and Brady and that type of thing. But at the same time, Tom Brady has that mentality. He has that. He's just a gamer. He's a competitive guy, and I don't count him out of any game. But I do think that Tennessee. I said this at the very beginning of the year. I thought that this is going to be a year for Tennessee where maybe this isn't the year that they take the step to being a powerhouse in the AFC, but I think that this is the year where we start taking note of what the Titans are capable of moving forward. So I'm going to pick New England, like I said, but don't count out Tennessee just because it's Tom Brady playing against Tennessee.
I'm counting out Tennessee. Patriots by 21 points, and we'll move on from there. The other AFC matchup, kind of interesting because it's Jacksonville at Pittsburgh. Jacksonville beat Pittsburgh at Pittsburgh by 21 points earlier this season, and the Steelers safety Mike Mitchell this week guaranteed a win against the Patriots in the AFC Championship, which is a very he's assuming a lot of things. He's assuming the Steelers beat Jacksonville. He's assuming the Patriots beat Tennessee, which I already assume as well. But that's a very cocky statement to make, and I think it could bite him in the butt. I'm picking Jacksonville to beat the Steelers in Pittsburgh, and it's going to be because Blake Bortles has 24 carries for 200 yards, not because he throws the ball for more than 100 yards, because he probably won't do that.
Well, I picked Pittsburgh Steelers to get to the Super Bowl at the very beginning of the year. If you remember right, if you've been listening to the show since the preseason, I believe, the Steelers were the team that I thought was going to win. It was going to become the powerhouse team in the AFC with all the talent they have. Roethlisberger, Antonio Brown, Le'Veon Bell seems to kind of have the off-field stuff figured out. Juju Smith-Schuster has improved so dramatically over the last couple years that it's incredible again. So I think that Pittsburgh is the better team here. I'm going to pick Pittsburgh, but I'm not going to rule out Jacksonville unless it comes down to a Blake Bortles play. If it comes down to Blake Bortles,
yes. Well, if he runs, he'll probably convert
He's pretty good at running.
He is. If he runs for that first down, or if it's like 3rd and 8, if I'm Pittsburgh, I'm spying like 4 guys on him, and then I'm just letting him try and make a throw. But how funny would a Jacksonville versus Tennessee AFC Championship be? Like, that's actually in the realm of possibilities right now, and it's kind of funny to think about. But the final matchup here, the big divisional game at U.S. Bank Stadium, New Orleans.
Which game is
New
that?
Orleans at Minnesota. It kind of means a little bit of something to us around here. This has some meaning to it, I think. Minnesota hosting the Saints. Rematch of Week 1, if you want to call it that. I'm not going to call it that. But who do you have in this game? I think I know, and people that have listened to this show should know what the answer is. But what do you got?
I think it's funny, first of all, that you said it's not a rematch of Week 1, because to me, again, I'm a fan. That's what I am right now.
For you, then it's a rematch.
It's a rematch of 2009. Yeah. So I think the Vikings are going to win this game. Now, do I know how they're going to win this game? Not at all. Because, again, I've said that they're two very competitive teams. I'm optimistic that the Vikings can come through here and put themselves in a good situation to win this football game, whether they win it in the first quarter as they did against Cincinnati, or they win it, down the stretch as we've seen them do countless times in the past. Two very, very, very talented teams. But I think the Vikings are the better team here. I think they are more well-coached. Again, that's probably an unpopular opinion, but that's what I think. And ultimately, it comes down to a mentality thing. If Mike Zimmer keeps this team grounded, if they stay smart and they play their game, the sky is the limit for the Vikings. And I've been preaching that for a very, very long time. And I think that this is the moment to really define what this team is. Define why this team deserves such a great reputation. Why this team deserves everything that's coming to it. And I think that this is just an opportunity to prove to everyone that Minnesota and Mike Zimmer and the team as a whole is prepared and ready to win this football game. And I think they need to come out and show that in order for people to believe it. In order for people to truly believe that this is the best Vikings defense of all time, I think that they need to win this football game. But, I'm going to pick the Vikings, and
you sound very uncertain.
I think that the Vikings are going to win this game, but I am very well aware of how talented the Saints are, and I think it comes down to if Mike Zimmer can do his thing. I think the Vikings win this football game.
I'm going to pick with much more conviction than that. I'm going to pick the Vikings by a score of 20-16, and it's going to come down to a late game third down play that will ultimately decide it. And I think whether the Vikings are on offense or the Vikings are on defense, that they will win that battle, and that will decide the game.
You really think it's going to be that close?
I do, because I think the Saints defense has been underrated. I think Cameron Jordan is a phenomenal pass rusher, and the fact that he can play on both sides concerns me a little bit for Case Keenum. And I think Marshawn Lattimore will lock down Diggs, to be honest. I think I've said this before, when Diggs plays against top talent, especially man-to-man guys, it's the one thing to go against Norman, his own guy, and get past him, but to go against a man lockdown player like Patrick Peterson, he doesn't seem to show up. So I think it'll be a lower scoring game, but I think that benefits the Vikings. So I think they win in a close one.
Okay, well, Vegas opened this game with a 4-point spread. That's from our guy Scott Cooley at Bookmarker EU. Vegas has the Vikings winning this game by 4 points.
It's actually up to 5 now, by the way.
Is it up to 5? Okay. I think that it has the potential to be even more than that, simply because, the Vikings defense has shown a capacity to control talented offenses. You mentioned the Rams earlier in the show, right? How many points did they allow to that team?
Well, they scored the Vikings or the Rams?
The Rams. How many points did they score against the Vikings defense?
They scored 0 in the last 52 minutes of the game.
Right. Right. So I think the Vikings have, they have the opportunity to shock the world here. It's, again, very talented Saints team. Very talented. I'm not going to say I'm not going to say something negative about Drew Brees, because that guy is extremely talented.
And again, I'm not saying the Saints offense is going to light up the Vikings defense. They're going to score 16 points in my prediction. I think the Vikings offense does barely enough against an underrated Saints defense to get the win. That's my point here.
Yeah, well, it's a fair point. I don't think you're the only one that has that take. I've seen all kinds of different people say, that the Vikings are, in trouble here. But I think that the Vikings are going to win this football game. And the scoreboard may say, that it was a close one. That's possible. Anything is possible. It's the postseason. But at the same time, I think that, I think the Vikings have the potential to win by more than the Vegas spread, which, again, you said it was up to 5 points now. I think that it could be even more than that. So we'll see how that ultimately, goes down. But that's the end of the show for the week. So as always, we appreciate everyone listening to the show. Thank you for, taking the time to tune in. What's up?
Watch party.
That's important here. Black Stat.
Something funny?
Nothing's funny.
Oh, yeah? Okay.
Okay, so Black Stack Watch Party. I spit a little bit when
Oh, well, good thing this is a podcast.
Yeah. Black Stack Watch Party. I'll be down there watching the game. That's what I'm doing on Sunday. Come on down. You can hang out with me, watch the game, enjoy the moment. That's what I'm planning on doing this week. So it's going to be a lot of fun. And, I think it's a great opportunity to not just kind of show your support for the About the Labor podcast, but also an opportunity to, enjoy some very competitive football. And I think that it's, I think that this is a moment that needs to be, everyone needs to be excited about this moment. And I think that what Black Stack is offering with their big screen TV, with all their room, their space, and, the opportunity to deck the place out and, blow the cover off of not just U.S. Bank Stadium, but also, potentially do the same thing for, Black Stack Brewing as well, and that helps us. It's it's an important reminder that I feel like I need to say. So come on down, show your support for the show, show your support for the Vikings, and I think it'll be a lot of fun. So hope to see everyone down there. And as I was saying before, iTunes, Stitcher, CastBox, that's where you can find the show for the most part. It's on a couple other places as well, but those are the primary spots. Zone Coverage is where you can find my written work. VikingsTerritory.com is where you can find Drew's work. On Twitter, myself and Drew at VikingsATL Pod. Myself, Robert Reidell, Reidell, Drew Mahowald, Mahowald. And yeah, hit the subscribe button on YouTube if you haven't done that already. And yeah, any closing thoughts from you? Good?
No. I think you have spoken enough for me as well. So I think we're good.
All right. So that's that. Enjoy the game this weekend. Try, and I'll do the same. And yeah, so we'll catch you guys later on this week.